why she texts me and questions.
I mean, and right now, I'm trying to think how much the one weighs. Probably like 260, 270, but I don't know, you know, when I can get it in. Or if you want a bigger one, have this sow. She's only had 1 litter, so she's bigger if you want more meat to split with somebody.
That will split it.
Okay.
Did you see that message I sent in response? How do you go with Miss Pat?
But it may be a couple weeks before.
She was there.
I have one going to
Yeah.
I have one space in the
I didn't
locker.
either. I haven't tried it on my phone to see.
You have to.
The 11
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Seneca.
So
And
next time we
then
have
I've got a call tomorrow for the other 2 smaller ones, so it may be
Is
a
6,
couple more
we want to
weeks.
wait a couple minutes for Bobby, or?
It's hearing and
She worked today, so she.
yeah, she said she texted me, said she'd be a couple minutes late, since I think we can go ahead and get started.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll call the meeting to order. I need a motion to declare an open meeting.
I'll make a motion to declare an open meeting. Second.
I have a motion by Hope and a second by Mary. And I don't have my sheet, so I'm just going to start with Mary.
Yes.
JW,
Yes.
Hope,
Yes.
Bobby is not here yet, and Jason, yes. Hold that thought. I thought I was ready. All right. We don't have any visitors, but we welcome anybody online to the meeting tonight. As to the law, the Board of Education does adhere to an Opens Meeting Act, and a copy of that act is posted on the wall to the right. This meeting has been properly advertised according to the policy and the Nebraskans Open Meeting Act. Go ahead and review the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented. I'll second.
Motion by Mary, second by Hope. All right, we're going Hope.
Yes.
Oh, wait, do we have any discussion? Sorry.
I don't.
Mary? Hope, you said yes.
Yeah.
Mary?
Yes.
Jason, yes. JW?
Yes.
Motion carried. All right. So we have to recess for the budget meeting?
I think that's the safer way of doing it. That's kind of, I just think, yes, I think we should recess. So probably a motion to recess with a time, and then we'll have the hearing.
And then do we vote, and then do we feel discuss? We just vote, right?
You could discuss it, yes, but yeah, it'd be just a vote, a motion and a second to recess, conduct the hearing, and then a motion and a second with a vote to resume the meeting.
Gotcha.
I'll make the motion to recess for the budget hearing.
Second.
Motion by Hope, second by JW. To recess for the budget hearing.
Probably need a vote on
Okay.
that. Sorry, I didn't clarify that. That's my fault.
All right, so that leaves me with Mary,
Yes.
Jason, yes, JW,
Yes.
and Hope.
Yes.
Motion carried. We are recessed. Did you get it?
This might be a good time for me to talk about the meeting, why we have to do, I think that's what I typically do at this time, is if there's no other comment, is to talk about why we have to have this meeting at a separate time. Historically, we've had this meeting early just as a matter of precaution, so that in case something didn't get published right, or if something, the board didn't agree on the budget, you'd have time to republish and still comply with all the requirements before the deadline, which is September 30th. Now, that's all made tighter now with the joint hearing obligations for districts that have to do that as well. So because about 2020, the new law went into effect that said that the board must conduct a hearing prior to adopting the budget. The hearing must be held separately from any regularly scheduled meeting and may not be limited by time. So that's what we were going to do last Wednesday, but it worked out to just go ahead and use the meeting times that we had. It kind of probably begs the question, why did we have an extra meeting scheduled in the first place? Well, it's to fulfill these obligations and try to get things done as early as possible, just in case we have a situation come up like we did where we have a board vacancy and we can't get a quorum. And so it just created a natural opportunity to roll things back, which we could do again if need be, to later in the month. So that's really why we meet early on this. When it's possible, I like to meet yet in August, if we can squeeze it in. This year just didn't work that way.
All right. So is this where you give your spiel? or-
No, I think we would open the floor to anybody who has comments about the budget.
Okay, we'll open up the floor for anybody who has any comment.
This is the one hearing that you cannot limit the total duration by time. You can limit individual speakers by time, but you couldn't cap it at 30 minutes. So if we had people lined up down the hall and they wanted to talk for 5 hours, we'd have to sit here for 5 hours. That's in statute.
Derek, would you like to share anything?
Prefer not to.
Seeing nobody else here, we'll go ahead and we'll conclude public comment. And then we have the motion to resume. I'll make a motion that we resume our meeting at 6:06.
Second.
Motion by Jason, second by JW. Jason, yes. JW,
Yes.
Hope,
Yes.
and Mary.
Yes.
Motion carried. We are back into our scheduled meeting. Superintendent's budget summary.
Okay, so as part of the law changes that happened a few years back, they required a presentation by the board on the budget. For schools, that generally is assumed to be the superintendent or whoever's the executive in charge of the budget. So I have an outline. I'll try to stick to the script here pretty closely, but I feel like a lot of these things are important things to discuss pertaining to the budget and tax request. And so I'll just kind of go through my presentation. That's at the top. It's titled Pawnee City Public Schools 24-25 Budget and Tax Request. So valuation and tax request, our total valuation went up by just shy of 8% this year. So we had pretty large, I would say, relatively speaking, valuation growth for the district. So our total valuation is just shy of $400 million, about $396 million. Hi, Bobby. Oh, no worries. So what that means then is 1 penny in our valuation generates $39,615. So if we levy a dollar, then that's just shy of $4 million that would generate. You've heard me talk about the joint hearing. It's called the pink postcard notice. That was a new law that went into effect for the first time last year. To avoid participation in that, your total tax request can only go up by 2% plus real growth. So whatever real growth means, like capital improvements to new structures going up, that sort of thing. I assume, but I don't know, that the new grain terminal going up north of town will create a 1-year opportunity to grow tax requests without involving the pink postcard. But that's to be determined. For now, in this last year, we only had just shy of 0.2% of our valuation growth was a result of real growth. So combined, that results in a total increase of your general fund and your building fund tax request, not levy, but actual dollar amount, can only go up by 2.19%. Otherwise, you have to participate in the pink postcard hearing. It's important to note there too, that whatever you use becomes whatever is approved this year, which I almost think is kind of counterintuitive on this bill. It almost puts boards in a situation where they want to take full advantage of it every year, whether they feel like they need to or not, because whatever you set as your tax request for this year becomes the basement for next year, and so on and so forth down the road. And so if you don't take advantage of all that, then you lose it for subsequent years, for purposes of the joint hearing. And it's a combination of both general fund and building fund for the total tax request is what that can go up. So what was published, what I proposed first to the committee and then to the board for publication, was a total tax request. This does not include the 1% that goes to the county, $3,254,000, which is the equivalent of 82.97 cents on the general fund, and then an additional $60,000, which is equivalent to 1.53 cents into the building fund. 1% of that, if you did the math on that and realized, well, that doesn't equal your total, that's because 1% additional is added on and it goes to the county. The county collects 1% of all taxes levied within the county, which the school is the lion's share of that. So the city, 1% of the city's taxes goes to the county. There's been efforts over the years to repeal that, but there was a law passed years ago that has always given 1% of all taxes to the county. So what's being proposed is an 84.5 cent levy for next year. You may recall that we don't have to levy into QCPUF this year. We've been levying for 10 years now into QCPUF, and we should have adequate funds to pay off the bond with our last payment coming due in December. Timing on that is not ideal because our last big check doesn't come until January. So there might be a situation in December where we have to pay out of building fund or paid out of general fund, and then transfer that money back out of QCPUF after it shows up, which you can do. I checked on that about this time last year, knowing that last year would be the last year we would levy into the QCPUF. So the money should be there. It just may not be there in time, and that just has to do with the way that the 10 years ago, that the way that the amortization was set up on that bond, and when that last payment came due. It probably won't be a lot. It might be $50,000 that we'd have to pay out of one fund and then transfer back in on that money, between $50,000 and $100,000, give or take. And then that we'll probably continue to collect delinquent taxes into that fund for a few months after that. And then we can have a conversation next year whether we want to keep that fund at all or if we just want to close it out. But that's a conversation for down the road. I just wanted to point out that in a few months, we may have to make that last payment, we may have to borrow money temporarily for a month until that cash shows up on that last tax request payment. So that'll result in, without QCPUF and with a increase in valuation and no increase in total taxes, that'll result in what will constitute an 84.5 cent total levy. This is down about just shy of 7 cents from last year. And it's actually total dollars, not a lot, but it's down $6,500 without QCPUF and total dollars being requested from last year. I would point out that it's only been within the last few years that the district, Pawnee City, has, and I've got kind of a history of that later on here. We typically, going back to at least the turn of the century, have always had a levy around $1 to $1.05. There was one or two years where we dropped around 95 and then it went right back up. So it's only been recently, within the last few years, that we've been able to lower that levy down. And that's largely due to a couple reasons. One is because valuation has gone up, and two is because we haven't really increased our tax request dollar amount. Partly that's been a result of a little more state aid. It's not in the form of certified state aid, but more so in the form like of SPED reimbursement and that sort of thing. We've seen over the last 9 years, approximately a 2% annual increase in our total revenue as a result of increases in some state reimbursement on special education and some other things. But by and large, I feel like we've been very fiscally responsible. I'm turning to page 2. For example, in 2017-18 fiscal year, would have been my second year on the job. Our total levy was $1.03.5 cents. With a total tax request that year of 3.4 million, 3.475 million. So that means this year, 7 years later, with a few years of pretty meager inflation, and now a few years of pretty hyperinflation, we've decreased our total tax request by $130,000. Not adjusted for inflation or real dollars. That's actual dollars. Request has gone down by 130,000 between 2017-18 and right now. Over that same time frame, we've seen a valuation increase of about 18%. So our valuation has gone from about 320 million to just shy of 400 million. Over that same time, we've lowered our levy 19 cents. So kind of almost a dollar for dollar shift there. Now, I think it's important to do that for our taxpayers when we can. I do want to caution the board that I probably don't think it's something that's going to be sustainable into the future. We've dodged now 2 years in a row the pink postcard hearing participation. Maybe this is year 3 on pink postcard. But nonetheless, we've dodged the pink postcard for a few years. We've been able to stay within that growth rate without having to participate in that. And I think it's only a matter of time before we will need to, because keeping your revenue growth at only 2% annually is probably not a long-term sustainable thing to do with inflation the way it is. However, currently we have pretty good cash on hand in our general fund. And I think with the money that was over 2 million, with including our September 1st property tax check. So we're in pretty good shape, cash on hand. My budget that I built for this coming year didn't have really any fluff in it at all. So sometimes you build in a little bit of fluff here and there, just on uncertain things. I really didn't build any of that in this year because I knew we had good cushion in cash on hand. So we should be, if everything went the way it's supposed to, we'd be revenue neutral. We might come out a little, with transfers and everything, we might come out a little below, and our expenses may exceed receipts, but I don't anticipate that to be by a large amount. Some of that'll maybe have to do with when payments come in, which fiscal year, for example, but it won't be maybe more than $100,000 in one direction or the other. Given these conditions, in my opinion, some districts and some administrators and boards operate by the mindset that keep the levy consistent from year to year without it going up and down. I don't tend to agree with that. I tend to think if you've got the opportunity to lower the levy 1 year or 2, do it and then raise it when you need the money again. And I think that's the most fiscally responsible thing to do, and I think the taxpayers will appreciate that versus having the levy being 15-20 cents higher. Finally, I want to talk a little. I've got a few more things here. Next topic to discuss before I move on. Any questions on valuation and tax requests? All right. Next topic is state aid and budget. As you guys know, every year I try to do kind of my crystal ball what state aid is going to do, which I've done for this year. Probably haven't put as much time into it as I have in years past on what state aid will do. I won't go into all the nuances like I have in the past, but if you would look into your packets, it's the one that's in pretty small print. It has yellow, blue, kind of a salmon colored highlights on it. It just generally looks at how the historical state aid components over the last 20-ish years and then kind of my projection. So the top row would be the line to look at. So the first number you look at is your formula needs. And that number, that 5671, 228 is entirely a guess. It's partly based off of real numbers and partly based off of my best guess because those numbers don't exist yet. But they come from this little box on the bottom right. These are the components that make up what your formula needs are. The formula, the TIOSA formula looks at your district and they say, how much should it cost to run your district? And they look at our district and they say it should cost, during the current year, they looked and said it should cost about 5.1 million to run your district. Now, obviously, the number for next year is higher. Maybe it's a little too high, but it's based off of some math I did. So now you look to the box that's in the middle, which is basic funding. Basic funding is they look at all of the districts in your array. Your array is they take districts, the AFR from every district, from the smallest to the largest in the state. And they put them in order by enrollment to the nearest 100th formula student from the smallest to the largest. And then to come up with basic funding, they look at the 10 districts that are smaller than you in terms of total enrollment and the 10 districts that are bigger than you in terms of total enrollment. They drop out the outliers, the two biggest ones, the two smallest ones, and they take total expenditures minus general fund operating expenditure, or excuse me, minus the allowances. So and then they come up with what's referred to as general fund operating expenditures. Then they plug those numbers back in based on your own numbers, which are those formula needs on the right, and then they spit out a number that determines your local needs. So enrollment, this is where enrollment really is a huge factor in determining whether we get equalization, continue to get equalization aid. So your enrollment's going to determine where you're at in your array. If your enrollment's bigger, you're going to be compared to bigger schools that probably had bigger expenses. If your enrollment goes down, even just 10 students can make a big difference in that array. And so moving us up and down in that array, and just since I've done this, we've lost like 2 or 3 students. You know, our numbers were pretty good since the start of the year. We've had a few. That always happens after the school year gets going. So we're creeping down that array. October 1st is the count date, which is also the count date for football and other sports as well. It's the same number. They use the same number for all of it. So that's the number we're looking at, and then they'll take our AFR from 23, 24, and everyone else is in the state. They'll pull out all their allowance numbers, come up with your average, and then they'll plug in your individual allowance numbers that you come up with. Whether it's transportation, the ones listed are the ones that we've historically gotten. On poverty, special receipts allowance, which is your SPED reimbursement, which will go up this year because SPED reimbursement went up. So it helps us as a new cash flow, but it hurts us as a formula resource. So the formula basically looks at, going back up to the yellow line at the top now. I know I'm talking fast, I apologize. The formula looks at total needs minus total resources. If you have a negative, that's it. You don't get any equalization aid. Needs minus, right, if you have a negative number, you get no state aid, no specifically equalization state aid. If you have a positive number, that's how much you can get in equalization aid. But there's been so many new resources added in, particularly the per pupil funding, which was just added last year, that it pushes us out of that equalization range faster. So they took this $1,500 per pupil and they said, okay, we know that you equalize districts, the OPSs and them, which we kind of fall into that category because we have a relatively low valuation for a rural school. We know that you're going to get 2 years down the road when your new sped reimbursements comes in and hurts you as a new formula resource, we're gonna need something to offset that. So they said, of that $1,500 per pupil, we're gonna give you 900 of it within the formula and 600 of it out of the formula. And so that's when you look at the foundation aid inside the formula and the foundation aid outside of the formula, that's kind of where those two numbers fall. The other bottom line is, I won't go through the whole thing. Bottom line is that you take all the needs, add them up, you subtract out all of the resources. I'm coming up with, when I ran this, I come up with about 148,000 in equalization aid, and you add in option aid and all that, it comes out with about 957,000 in state aid. And that's based on a 4% growth of all districts. However, I was looking at those numbers today and I think it'll be smaller than that because I think our other actual receipts will probably be closer to $1 million this year than 900,000, which will drop us by exactly 100,000 in terms of state aid. So it'll probably be safely closer to 800 to 850,000 would be my best guess. And again, this is all projections. These are just my crystal ball of what I think is going to happen based on last year's numbers. AFR will determine all of this, and those audits aren't even done yet for all districts, or probably any yet. Your resources are based on your LER, your local effort rate is based on how much local property tax you could generate at a $1 levy. So they're assuming, the formula assumes that the district should be levying about $1 into their general fund before they get an equalization fund. Now, obviously, we're below that. So to me, that tells me that we're operating below the median, that we're operating a little thinner than what the formula says we should, which I think is favorable to taxpayers. Our per pupil numbers are a little higher, but I think that's because our sped rates are above average for a district our size, or our sped costs are above average for a district our size. But our non-sped numbers are probably significantly below districts our size per pupil. So what that all constitutes is, my best guess is we're gonna lose some more state aid. And you can see at our high point, we were up around almost 1.2 million. So we'll be down 400,000 or 500,000. And it takes about 3 cents on the levy to generate 100,000. So you lose 400,000 and another 100,000 in inflation, $500,000, that's 15 cents on the levy. So I just want to talk in terms of dollars and cents, and then cents on the levy. That's, am I saying we have to raise levy by 15 cents next year? I hope not. But I just want to plant that seed that 85, without any new funding formula come down the pike, that 85 may be a temporary low. I can see glazed over eyes. I'll try to speed through this last part. So then this last section, property tax request authority, this was our fourth cap that was placed on districts last year, went into effect last year. And you may recall that we had a vote on a resolution to raise our property tax authority. And it all came down, no one really, I didn't fully understand it until I could actually see the numbers when they came out this spring. So I'll kind of explain how this works. So our current, for this year, our property tax request authority is equals $3,798,813. And where that came from is they look at your total revenue in 23-24. They add in a 3% growth on total revenue. So it's not just property tax, it's all revenue. Then they subtract out your non-property tax revenue, they subtract out your sped reimbursement, they subtract out your state aid, specifically your TIOSA state aid, and then they add in prior year property tax authority, and then any of that 7% that you took last year. Now, we voted last year to take the full 7%, so for us, that number is $531,000. Had we not taken that, that number would have been much lower. So if we don't take the 7% this year, we'd be looking at a max levy of, and that, bear in mind, this is a combined general fund and building. It's both of them combined, cannot exceed $3.7 million. You can raise that, you can recapture that 7% and roll it forward for future years, because they didn't take that away yet. They tried to, but the bill didn't pass because it was tied to another bill. We could grow that to 4.1. Now, we don't need $4.1 million this year. We only need $3.1 million this year. However, I'll talk a little bit about why it might be a good idea to consider taking advantage of that now while we still do that additional 7%. So just before we do that, the combined general fund, this is a reference for last year, the general and building fund was $3,278,260. For the current year, or for this, what's being requested for approval on the 9th is $3,347,480. So that's $3.3 million, which is significantly less than $4.1 million. So as I pointed out, this is not just a limit on property tax, it's a limit on all revenue. So things to keep in mind then on the last page. Some reasons why, I'm going to skip ahead to the final bullet here. Some reasons why it might be wise to capture the 7% additional property tax authority for this following year. If the unicameral successfully gives us new formula funding, any new revenue they give us will lower by a dollar for dollar amount our property tax request. So districts who don't take advantage of that would have less wiggle room within it. Having unnecessarily restricted revenue caps, in addition to the other ones that already existed, budget authority, which is total money you can spend. We've always operated about $1 million under our limit there. Levy limits, $1.05 total for general and building fund, plus the pink postcard revenue growth requirement. If you limit yourself too much in this fourth area, you could limit your ability to offer competitive, or minimally legal wages and benefits to employees down the road, particularly if we get into a point where we have to expand benefits, perhaps for our non-certified personnel. Because of the Affordable Care Act restrictions, because like we've talked about, we're right up against the Affordable Care Act restriction. If we would have to pay for a large-scale HVAC project, for example, or some other project of that nature, but knowing that the condition of our high school building is maybe more fragile than I ever wanted to admit that it was, as only a 9-year-old system. But if we would have to fix that, that's money we don't have, and if we had to pay for that, we could potentially pay for it instead of going to a bond, just pay for it out of the building fund. But you have to have the levy wiggle room to do that. So if we hadn't taken it last year, and we wouldn't take it this year, our cap going into this year would be $3,449,784. Now that's still $102,000 above what we're requesting, but it's not giving us a lot of wiggle room there. So I guess I would probably urge the board to consider going ahead and approving that resolution, knowing we'll probably never use it, but not putting, and as long as I'm involved, I want to not overtax, not request money just because we can, but only request money we need. But not tie our hands down the road. So something to think about between now and next Monday. I would point out that particular resolution requires 5 votes, not 4 if we don't have a 6-member board. It requires 5 votes. So if we only have 5 members, all 5 of you would have to be present, and if any one of you were gone, we couldn't approve it at the meeting. So it requires 5 votes. I did, one last thing here, I did put a couple other bits of information in here. I do want to kind of tout our tax request history. It's this document. It kind of shows that, and I will admit that the previous 9 years that I listed, those are the 9 years that I've been involved. But over the last 9 years, our total tax requests, not levy, but actual dollars requested, have gone up by 0.6% on average. During the 13 years prior to that, it had gone up by 8.6% annually. So, we're doing a pretty good job of that may not be sustainable into perpetuity by any means, but for the last 9 years or so, we've done a pretty good job, in my opinion, of not unnecessarily gouging our tax requests. It's been a little higher. That includes QCPOP. If you exclude QCPOP and you look at just the building and the general fund, it's been more like 1% annually, but that's still well below inflation. Now, I will admit, I did today add in state aid, not just certified state aid, but also SPED reimbursement. And that has gone up about 2% of total revenue. It's gone up by about an average of, keep it healthy. So these would be the 2 columns on the right. So what I did is I went back as far as the numbers were readily available, and I looked at certified state aid plus what HEOSA reported for that fiscal year and all other receipts. So that would be mostly SPED reimbursement, but it would also be motor vehicle tax and those sort of things, and see how that has changed. And you can see since 16-17, it has gone up by an average of 6.7%. As a percentage of total revenue, it's more like 2% of total revenue. So that's how we've been able to keep our tax request pretty level. But I still think operating within a 2.5% growth over 9 years means the board's doing a good job, in my opinion. I know that's a lot of information. If you have any questions about anything, please don't hesitate to ask. You need time to think about it, and you want to ask later on, by all means, call or email. So on next Monday night, since everything got pushed back, we'll be doing it at the regular meeting. There'll be we have to do a tax request hearing still. So that'll be held that night. And then we need, which it's like the night won't be very long. I don't think we have to recess for that one. That can be just part of the meeting. Then we'll have to pass tax request, budget, maybe not in this order, the resolution for tax request and budget, then the resolution for, if the board wants to do that, for property tax award. Those would be the 4 motions we would have to do pertaining to the budget. And maybe there's another one that I'm not thinking of, but for sure those 4.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Brian now? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and gonna make a motion to move that the Board of Education enters into a closed session at 6:38 to discuss the board vacancy for the purpose of prevention of needless injury or the reputation of potential board applicants.
Second.
Lost my sheet. Motion by Jason, second by JW. Bobby,
Yes, sorry.
Hope,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Jason, yes, JW.
Yes.
We are in closed session.
We should go somewhere else. What's that?
We can check out.
Why don't we just go somewhere else? Yeah, that's what, I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah, I'm gonna read what you said.
I think I'm gonna run over and get my computer so I can do some more work.
That's what I've been doing this whole time.
I usually try to, but that pilot car got me, and so I was late getting into town, and I didn't want to run over there and be later.
Yeah, as he's talking about the numbers and stuff. I
find it really interesting, but I think outside of him and his position, I think all of us are here.
yeah.
And so
Well, like, that's what I'm like, I can do a lot of work right now. So,
I like hearing it. Helps me like better understand the big picture of where we sit. But there's so much of it I still don't understand.
yeah,
Well, I'll be back in a few.
okay.
Don't know what to expect, but with as many letters as there ended up being, could be a little while.
Oh, yeah, there is lots of junior high.
That's cool.
Just hope they can stay out.
Yeah.
All right. righty. We need a motion to come out of executive session.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by Mary, second by Bobby. I don't know where my sheet's at.
7:09.
7:09, all right. Bobby,
Yes.
Hope,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Jason, yes, JW.
Yes.
We are out of closed session. All right. Discuss and consider any action on filling the school board vacancy. I think we had various candidates. I believe that each one of them could bring a different perspective to the board.
I agree. I think it was encouraged that there's a lot of interest in people wanting to make our school better. So I think all of them for.
Exactly.
Didn't make our lives very easy.
Exactly.
Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we nominate Corey Hatfield to fill the Lisa Hunzucker's vacant seat.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Where are we at? Oh, discussion. Sorry.
I don't have
You don't have any?
anything to discuss really.
It was kind of nice to see so many people interested and we did have a lot of good candidates and it's not an easy decision, which is kind of a positive.
Yeah, very. Anybody else? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and we'll go with Hope.
Yes.
Mary?
No.
Jason? No? JW?
Yes.
And Bobby?
Yes.
Motion carried, 3-2. There's only one thing left on our agenda.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
All right, motion by JW, second by Bobby. That puts Hope,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Jason, yes, JW,
Yes.
we are adjourned.